a little bit of the bonus material from the Oddity Archive DVD release, the public domain disc. Or if you were really lucky, VHS or beta. And order your copy today. And somewhere in the bonus material, you can hear me play kind of a crappy, 5-minute pseudo bluegrass rendition of Pavand. But anyway, if ever an episode of Archive needed a commentary, it's probably this one. So, of course, old Benny Boy here, and I'm going to discuss the dreaded episode 200. So, I guess I'll have to jump back to 100 briefly here. When it came time to do episode 100 in 2016, I just wasn't really enthused with the idea, and the smartass in me just wanted to jump straight from 99 to 101 and just have 100 be this kind of mysterious black hole in the archive catalog. But obviously I knew I wasn't going to get away with that, and ultimately I just tried to embrace it, and I tried to make kind of the ultimate archive episode. So I did the Commodore 64, and I got a restored C64 and all the parts for it, and dumped a lot of money into it. I had some discs sent in from my buddy Ben Struens, who you'll see a few times throughout this episode. And I thought I had a real good one, some comedy, some history lesson, just kind of the ultimate archive episode, and just, I guess, a little bit of psychotherapy as well with the intro to that one. But sure enough, when the episode came out, it did not go over very well. And, I mean, its reputation has kind of leveled off since then. And let me derail for a second here. That really is a recording of me at, I think, 9 years old.
We went back to our old opening song.
It's amazing the junk that I keep. But anyway, getting back to episode 100, it just did not go over very well at the time. So much so that I was getting angry emails over it. And one from a very upset mom on behalf of her, if memory serves, her autistic teenage son. And because there was a bit where I was reading 50 Shades of Grey, and obviously I didn't pick an overtly dirty part of that, but the idea was I was trying to foresee the future and what nostalgia would look like in the year 2036 and all. But, it just kind of blew up in my box-obscured face. So, when episode 200 started coming down the pike, I was really not enthused with the idea. And this time I was a little more serious about just jumping straight from 199 to 201. I didn't want to go through that again. And then, of course, common sense prevailed, and no, I'm not going to get away with that. And it doesn't matter what I do, good, bad, or indifferent, it's going to get some blowback. Well, I'll just go in the opposite direction. So instead of throwing everything at it, I'll throw nothing at it. And little did I know, episode 200 wound up being probably the most radical transformation from beginning to end that I've ever had. So initially, the idea was for 200 was, I don't even want to appear in this stupid thing. And I thought about it for a while, and I remembered some episodes of certain sitcoms, when they would hit episode 100 or 200, there would be a clip show. And I thought, well, that might work, Oddity Archive's Greatest Hits or something like that. But then it was, okay, well, I'm going to have some kind of special guest host, and I'll probably still have to write the damn thing anyway. Yeah, that's not going to work. So then it became, well, I'd still like to kind of sit this one out, and eventually it mutated into, maybe I can do some sort of warped history lesson, even though I'm not a big fan of making the history lessons. Those things are just no fun to make. I know a lot of my viewers like them, but they stink to make. But anyway, I thought, well, I'll do some sort of history of archive. I'll turn the tables on myself. And that gave way to, well, maybe a mockumentary would be in order. That way I can really minimize my own voice in it. And little did I know, because I was still going to have to write it. And indeed, this part that we're coming into now, not quite yet, but there's some alleged interviews with me from 2015. And I really was going to try and, because I have copies of most of the interviews that I've done, I thought I would pull one of the times where I'm giving the stock story of how I started Archive and how I wrote Pavand. And nothing really fit, or I would get derailed by the host or whatever. So I actually had to go back and recreate them. So I just grabbed my iPad and just rattled off my stock stories about it, and that's what wound up in the video. So, still a little new performance on my part. So anyway, getting back to the whole mockumentary thing, to me, the twin towers of mockumentaries are both rock mockumentaries. The Ruddles, All You Need Is Cash, and This Is Spinal Tap. And I guess my ego got a little bit the better of me, and I thought, well, maybe I can make the Ruddles or the Spinal Tap of YouTube. I can finally be the one to really cut it down to size. And obviously, it never became notorious enough for that to happen. But anyway, I really liked the idea of at least attempting that. But then the problem was with the Ruddles and Spinal Tap. In the case of the Ruddles, you had Eric Idle playing some sort of goofy reporter, visiting all the old haunts of the Ruddles and all. And in Spinal Tap, Rob Reiner playing Marty DeBurgi, a filmmaker with maybe a little bit of an agenda. And I did wind up folding in the agenda part a bit here. The guy that made this was kind of intent on cutting me down, it seems. So then it was, okay, well, I can't do that. It's not practical. There's no way I can make it work. It would probably have to be done in person. I'd probably have to visit that person or bring them out or whatever, and that just wasn't going to happen. So then it was, okay, a narrator. And it ultimately ended up as kind of a behind the music kind of thing, just out of necessity. So, but even that changed on me, as I implied. So initially, I knew exactly who I wanted to do the voiceover, and that was Bill Tush. Now, if you're not familiar with him, way back before TBS, Turner Broadcasting Service or System or whatever it is, the cable channel became what we know it as. It was this little goofy channel, UHF channel in Atlanta, and they would try and do their own news. And the person who had the overnight news job was Bill Tush. And after a certain point, it became comedy. He stopped reporting the news seriously, started making fun of it, involving sketches and gags and anything he could. And eventually it became its own real comedy show. But the guy has a great voice and a really great sense of comic timing, and I would have loved to have gotten him. And making Archive for all these years, I've developed a strange knack for developing a friend of a friend, and he happens to be one of those friend of a friend, friend of a friend's. So I was going to try and get a hold of him and see if he would be interested, but then I was like, I really don't want to bug the guy, and he's long since retired from broadcasting. He probably doesn't even own a microphone or, any means of doing this. And I just wound up chickening out. I never did try to get a hold of him. So then my next choice was Jim Barton, who's a pretty well-known voiceover guy. He was the main voiceover guy for WFLD in Chicago for many years and has done a bunch of commercials. And he's very well-known. You don't have to be from Chicago to know his voice. And he is still active. And I tried to look into that, and his fee was just going to be off the charts for what I could afford. So that didn't happen.
Section and great.
So then I figured I'd better set my sights just a little bit lower. So I went on Fiverr.com, and the implication being that its services for $5. And I thought maybe I'll find some young person just starting out, give them one of their first jobs, help them get their feet wet and all. And of course, they would never admit that they would have anything to do with Oddity Archive. That's something you do not want on your resume. But nobody was really cutting it amongst the younger set. And so I started looking at some of the older, more experienced people, and sure enough, their performances were a lot better. But I ultimately picked out a guy named Eric Gerstein. And I had sworn I had heard his voice somewhere before. He sounds a bit like the Behind the Music guy, if you remember that show. And his website doesn't list anything. He doesn't show much of a resume. So maybe he has done some famous stuff and he's just staying quiet about it. But anyway, part of the selling point was not just his voice, but it was an estimated turnaround time of 3 to 4 business days. And so I gave him the script, and I figured I would just go off and work on some other parts of the episode. I was waiting for some of the guest spots to come in, and I was also, during this period, making record ripoffs for that year. So I was kind of ready to just go off and work on some other stuff, but I'll be damned, within 24 hours, he had the finished material. Having said that, I was not very happy with what he turned in initially. So he did give me 2 full passes of everything, but you could tell he was cold reading. He was kind of stumbling on some words, mispronouncing some words, not being consistent. Sometimes like naming a year, he would say 2012 and then turn around and say 2013, that sort of thing. But then I realized, well, the whole joke of this whole thing is everybody's just dumping on old Benny Boy. Nobody likes Ben. So how perfect is it to have some narrator that just really doesn't care and is just tossing it off? And now, the funny thing with his voiceover was the first pass, for all the mistakes in it, it had a certain energy to it. And I only wound up reverting to the second take when he would really badly stumble on something. So it was just one of those really bizarre moments. Take 2 was just flat as a pancake. So anyway, I suppose I should start talking about some of the guest shots here, and I wasn't really expecting a whole lot. If anything, I was a little worried that I'd be having to stretch out a few parts as far as I could, or maybe having to inject some more new material involving performance on my part. But really, I just started going around emailing and calling friends and colleagues, and I was really surprised. Almost everybody that I asked said yes. There were a few that I couldn't get, the big one being Guru Larry Bundy Jr., but he was going through his fairly well-publicized health problems at the time with his weight and some of that stuff. So, that wasn't surprising. And I had reached out to the Found Footage Festival guys a couple times, and I just don't think they were interested. The big shock was Tecmone. So we've chatted a couple of times, and he is a donor to Patreon. But I thought I would just take a shot and see if he would be interested. And sure enough, he was. And he turned in easily one of the best performances. I just was bowled over when I saw it. And of course, he really got in some good, some good jabs at me. But aside from that, there were some among the friends and colleagues that I knew I could depend on to work in a narrative or give me something really to work with. So I knew, like, Gino Cuddy is incredibly good at just riffing on things. He can just go on forever about some very small detail. And so he gave me, I think, like 8 or 9 minutes of material, and I wound up using a really good chunk of it, and it wound up kind of helping to hang the whole thing together. And David A. Scott Jr., who is just an amazing actor, and Just a great comic, great improv, great writer. I'm always in awe of the guy, and I know he's always going to turn in something really good. And I was just dying at the stuff he shot in the park. You saw the bit with the boxes there going off. I mean, supposedly I've taken the whole world's supply of cardboard boxes. Well, yeah, I am kind of a box hog, but, it comes with the territory. So, although there was one bit with David in his final bit where he starts talking about, people who are doing cameos for people who are better than you, trying to stay relevant. And I'm just like, dude, you kick my ass every way to Sunday. What are you talking about? So, of course, I already mentioned Tecmone, and everything he did, he only gave me, I think, 3 or 4 minutes, but every second of it was just wonderful, and I think I used all of it. I had to kind of chop some of it around and kind of come in mid-sentence a couple of points just to keep things working from a narrative standpoint. But let's see, Nigel Driner, film historian, and I was a little disappointed in that I expected kind of better acting out of him, but on the other hand, he had a good joke, and for whatever reason, his footage was mirrored. So everything is reversed in the shot, and I could have easily corrected that, but I just thought it would be funny. It would just be one of those little random, silly, stupid moments in there. But I think the biggest shock was Skip Elsheimer of AV Geeks. He is AV Geeks. And because I've never really known him to be that much of an actor, but he just nailed it. And the only downside was he sent me a 7-minute piece, I think it was. And he does this whole rant about us going to war on eBay bidding on 16 millimeter film and showing me the entire reel of film that we got into a bidding war on. And initially I was kind of fooled by it, and I actually wound up checking in with him and saying, you do know that I have never bid on 16 millimeter film on eBay ever, don't you? And yeah, so he got me there. And Mike Oman there, formerly known as the Film Explorer, and a great connoisseur of esoterica. So I knew I could get some good, obscure, silly references. Who else is going to reference Playground in my mind? So then we've got, of course, Ben Struens, a very good friend of mine. And we were supposed to do a collaboration last summer in person, but he's in Canada, and the border closed due to COVID. And as of my making this, it is still closed, so we still can't quite do that. But hopefully someday we can get together and actually make something, some sort of real proper collaboration. But I was not too terribly surprised that he was going to take the opportunity to show off some of his gear, going off on my taste for gear while, wearing a big pair of vintage headphones and sitting in front of a Betamax deck and a CED machine and a Commodore PET and all that. And, there's Nigel's bit that I was mentioning just a couple minutes ago. Now, as for the fans, the initial idea was, like sometimes in commercials, you'll see these testimonials from satisfied customers. And I thought it would be funny if it would be, this son of a bitch ruined my life. And some of them kind of straddled the line, like Reese here. But I was really genuinely surprised at how many submissions I got just from viewers. I put out the call on Facebook, and I think I had at least 30 submissions, which was way more than I expected. And there were some good ones in there that just simply did not fit in the episode. And so I actually wound up doing kind of an addendum to this, just partially so I could clear house, and also so I could kind of fire back. Because, getting to my next point, this is allegedly a documentary made by one Hans Krulitzer. Well, I think just about everybody figured out that there is no Hans Krulitzer. But that I guess you could say character came about in that it seems like over half the documentaries I've seen in my life, just for whatever strange reason, were made by guys named Hans. So I thought it would be funny to have my documentary made by some dude named Hans. Now, as for Krelitzer, that was just stupid wordplay on my part. So one morning when I was kind of had this on the brain, I just wanted a donut for whatever strange reason. I usually don't do donuts. But I went to the donut shop and I had that name Hans kicking around my head. And there's the display case with all the bear claws and cinnamon rolls and whatever else. And there were some crullers in there. And for whatever reason, I thought, well, Hans Kruller. And, well, no, that's just too silly. So I dragged it out and it became Krelitzer. So that's all it was. There's no great significance to that one.
Ben finally sensed that a change was in order.
I really like episodes like this one. It seems like once a year, once every other year, I'll just make that episode that completely breaks the formula. And it's a real great change of pace for me. I don't know how much fun it is to watch, but I really enjoy making them. And I guess it's appropriate because initially it was the anti-archive episode, as I've already discussed, and it just turned into this huge beast of an episode. And it also became kind of a problem, too. I wound up having to delay the release of it just because I was still waiting for guest shots to come in. I was having a hard time editing the thing, and I needed to make some music for it. I needed to score it. And in the end, I made that a joke in and of itself. Can't you believe that Hans jerk made me score my own thing where they're crapping on me? Oh, jeez. So I wound up making really only, in all reality, 2 pieces of music, but 3 songs. So I did yet another version of Pavand, and I jokingly called it Vaporwave, which everybody came right back at me and said, no, it's still too quick. So I thought I was slowing it down by, I think, almost half. And yeah, I've turned it into Vaporwave. No. And otherwise, one was an improvised synth piece, and it wound up being a totally unintentional Jean-Michel Jarre pastiche. And then there was another thing where I just found a really nice violin sound on my bank of virtual instruments, and so that became kind of the melancholy end to the whole thing. Now, the reaction to this episode, I knew it was going to get some crap. It was just a given, no matter what I did, just like episode 100. So I was prepared for that one, but I was actually really worried at first because I always put things out a day early for Patreon donors, $5 and up. And I had never gotten a dislike on a video from the early release crowds. I thought, oh man, I really screwed the pooch here, didn't I? But in the end, it didn't really matter too much. I think most of the people that watched this got it. I knew it was going to sail right over the heads of some people. And I kind of figured that some people wouldn't be too thrilled with the idea of what's supposed to be a celebration of Oddity Archive and my own work being basically what I kind of wanted to be a Friars Club roast. You know, why would I want to kiss my own butt? You know, there's no fun in that.
Box of his is merely regaling us with.
So even though I think there's still about 8 minutes of this to go, I have really hit all the targets that I wanted to with this commentary. So I guess I'll start to wind it down here. But I suppose I should acknowledge that I'm sure I owe some pretty serious favors to the friends and colleagues that appeared in this episode. And I never did mention Weird Paul, did I? I was not expecting him to do that, but he was very gracious about it. And, you know, we've chatted a few times. I really like the guy. And I always have kind of a nod to him going on top of my cable box on the main archive set. You know, those are some of his albums on cassette sitting up there. So that was an honor moment right up there with Tech Moan and some of the other folks that appeared in this, and I tried to I should say I tried to find a balance at the time of keeping up the illusion of a real documentary, but also, yeah, this is all in good fun, and thank you to everybody that appeared in this. And for the, I don't know, 5 people that will ever listen to this commentary, all I can say is if you participated in this, even if your material didn't get used, thank you. And even the ones who seem to miss the point, I got a few who thought that episode 200 was going to be the end of archive, and I'm really not entirely sure why they thought that. If I gave off that vibe, that was totally unintentional. But even if you completely missed the point or missed the joke or whatever, thank you for participating anyway. Thank you for watching. And that's really all I've got to say about this one. I'm pretty proud of this one. It's one of those episodes that I knew was going to do okay numbers-wise, at least at the time, just because it was episode 200, by virtue of being 200. And so it never did become a real lasting sort of thing. It's not an episode I hear about at all from anybody at this point. And I may have waited too long to do this commentary, but I beat this into the ground so much at the time that I decided to just hold off on doing a commentary. So otherwise, I think I'm going to shut up here. And once again, thank you for listening. If you participated, thank you. And I am out of here.
Yes, that this is not the channel that will help you make that case.
Hey, Ben. Congratulations on your 200th episode.